Hey, good afternoon, everyone. My name is David Mills, and it's 2 p.m. at the UK, and it's another weekly WCGHE webinar. And today it's a great pleasure to be welcoming Isabel Montes from the School of Administration at FIT University in Colombia, and she's going to be talking about academic publishing. With a particular context of Colombia, and thinking about it in relationship to theories of academic capitalism. So these are topics that I've been writing about, and so I'm particularly looking forward to this as well. I think as we were discussing in the green room before the seminar, before we came on live, so often this is left to a community of people outside of higher education, and either as a policy question or as a scholarly communications field. So it's great to be addressing these issues within a higher education research space. So with no further ado, just a quick reminder of our protocols. So just so if you haven't been to our sessions before, we will always provide a recording of this on YouTube and on our events page tomorrow with the transcripts and slides. So do make use of that. And it's another just quick note that actually you can unmute and ask questions at the end. In the meantime, do use the chat function if you want to comment along the way. And at the end, then I can ask you to come forward and turn your video on and ask the questions. Those of you who know the rules will be familiar with all that, but it's welcome to anyone who is new. Thank you for coming. So today, I immediately hand over to Isabel. The screen is yours. Looking forward to this very much.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm going to share the screen now. Wait, one second. Sorry. 1 second, please. Let me know if you can see it now, please.
That's good. Perfect.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you, David, for the presentation, and everyone. Thank you for joining the webinar today. It's an honor for me to be here. Thank you so much for this space. What I'm going to present today is a study that shows a change in the academic journal publishing in Colombia. Specifically, I'm going to show how a specific policy introduced national journals, national Colombian journals, and for national researchers too, the dissemination of knowledge as private good. So I'm going to start with the motivation for this study. And the motivation for this study is based on the transition, is based on the transition of production, dissemination, and transmission of knowledge from being seen as public goods to a private goods, research and education, basically. And the vision of research and education as private good is reflected in changes that all of us experience in the higher education systems across the globe, such as budget cuts in public funding or increased tuition and fees, or what is this study what is the study focus, that is privatization and commercialization of research outcomes. So just to clarify, when we are talking about public goods, we see research and education that are not motivated by profit, but by public benefits. In contrast, when you change and see research and education as private good, they are responding to commercial interest, and they are seen as profit-taking activities. So this topic has been cover mostly in top-ranked research university in English-speaking countries, and other contexts such as the Global South and Latin America, in comparison to the Global North, have less explored. And Colombia is a very interesting place to study because we have both. We have a strong resistance to education as private good. For example, if the tuition is increased, you are going to see people on the street immediately demanding education as public good, especially increasing tuition in higher education institutions, but public institutions. But we have a lot of responsiveness to research as private good. So we have these contracts. All of these is introduced in countries or is materialized. One way is policies, and these studies see policies as agents of transformation. So I understand policy as first as an instrument for transforming higher education. If you have policies at national level or even institutional level at university practices. And also they are large social structures that are embedded in discourses and ideologies, such as research and findings and dissemination as private goods. So in this case, publishing has been more seen as a traditional form of dissemination and free flow of knowledge. And for example, patenting or a spin-off are seen more as private goods production from research. But what I'm going to argue is dissemination as private good, as a new layer of academic capitalism. So we have a theoretical gap and empirical gap here I want to cover. A theoretical gap is publishing have been categorized as public good dissemination activity without consider the for-profit model. We are going to talk more about this. And empirically, there is less attention in academic publishing from higher education perspective. Specifically, there is a lack of educational policy analysis, specifically research policy in higher education. Publishing has been mainly addressed by science policy scholars that they cover this topic, the topic of specifically of publishing from a different perspective. Even if you go, there is a journal that is research policy, and it is a completely different focus than higher education. And I think having this kind of topics, that publishing in the higher education field is very important lens field to cover this topic. In this sense, the research objective is, I'm going to analyze the introduction of the academic journal publishing market in the Colombian National Research Policy. This policy, the name is Quality of National Publication Policy. Specifically, I'm going to see how this policy, this Quality of National Publication Policy, justifies, promotes, and normalize research dissemination as private good in the Colombian context. So justification is seen as the rationale and reasons why this policy introduced research dissemination as a private good. Promotion are those actions that concrete actions that introduce research dissemination as private good, and normalization is the process of naturalization, are those assumptions about the right, about the normal that didn't have any explanation, it is not questioned, so that I'm going to focus on these three levels and analyze this policy. And the methodology that I am using, I used to cover this topic is critical discourse analysis. I use it as a research design and data analysis. Critical discourse analysis is a way to inductively analyze this policy and identify what are the represented ideas, what are the beliefs, what are the images, and what is true discourse. And discourses are understood as a way of representing that show how things might be or could or should be. And in this case, so I'm going to take, I took the justification, promotion, and normalization, but policy as that social structure where the discourse occurs, and this social structure gives us a message as how social practice, in this case, research dissemination, should be done. In this case, just to give you an example, where and how to publish, to be an ideal professor, or to be an ideal academic, or to be an ideal national journal. So let's talk about this data collection. So the data collection, it was basically one policy that you see here, the resolutions 790 of 2016. This policy is still in force, but this policy was supported by an official document. We call that compass, and that compass was support of an Elsevier document with statistics. I'm going to show both. And then the implementation of this policy was through two models of classification of academic journals. It is one model, but then they have an adaptation, just few changes. And then we have had 4 calls for Colombian journal classification between 2016 and 2022. But we are going to have a call pretty soon. So in total, I analyzed 12 the policy documents and calls. And let's go to the findings. I'm going to focus with the second goal of this policy. Let me go back. The policy, the quality of national publication, the quality of national publication policy, and this policy has 2 goals: improve the quality of national scientific publication. They want to improve this quality in order to increase national researchers' publications that were included in high impact citation index. And the second goal is the focus of this study, increase the presence of national scientific journals into high impact database and citation. And here in the second journal, there is introduced in the policy the academic journal for profit model. And these are basically through 2 forms: subscription-based articles that are profit-taking activity, and for bibliometrics. So the high-impact database and citation indexes are mostly covered by subscription-based articles and journals that are associated. These subscription-based articles are associated with the best science and prestigious journal. So professors and universities usually accept this symbolic capital because of prestige, and normalize giving the intellectual rights to the policy, to the companies, few companies, for example, Springer, Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, to mention some of them. So they give the intellectual property rights to these companies. These companies make profit from the professor's works. And 2 of these companies creates, Clarivate and Elsevier, creates the bibliometrics that measure the quality of the journals between Q1, Q2. Maybe you are familiar with Q1 journal, that that high impact means high level of citation for peer citations. So this, the presence of national scientific journals into high impact database and citation index, what I want trying to do is to introduce Colombian journals into this market, into the subscription-based articles market and bibliometrics ways to measure the quality of science, of the hegemonic way to measure the quality of publications. So now I'm going to talk how is justify this change and then how is promoted. Okay, let's go with the justification. What is the diagnostic? So I'm going to tell you that in Colombia, there is a national system of index section of public scientific publication, and the name is Publindex. So imagine that Publindex is a way to classify journal as a bibliometrics classified journal in Q1, just to give you an analogy. Publindex is the first local scientific database, and it according to the policy document, was behind on international bibliometrics. And to give you an example, at that time, we have in Colombia 551 journals, and 70 journals were included in these two important bibliometrics, as the document said, journal impact factor and SIMAGO journal rank indicator. So the primary rationale for this policy goal that is introduced the journals in this high impact was based on the low quality of national journals. And they gave us some statistics. I'm going to share with you this. 80% of the journals didn't have abstract in English and Spanish. They need to have both. Other statistics to show the low quality of national journal is like 26% of the journals, the authors of the paper were from the same institutions. So it was called that high level of inbreeding. And 7% of the journals, the editors of these journals didn't have PhD, and 10% of all of the journals delay in frequency and regularity of publication. It's interesting to see that all of these statistics were created by Elsevier in a report that the Elsevier did for Colombia. And Elsevier, for those who don't know, are the creator of bibliometrics SIMAGO journal rank indicator. So if you read the report, the report didn't include any positive aspect about national journal. The data were focused on problems, even though some of the mentioned problems were did not represent significant percentage of the total. As you see, the last one, 10% in delay in frequency. So it was very, the rationale was very like, we have a problem, we have a low quality of journals, and we really need the document finished that Colombia should increase the participation in the global market and cannot escape global trends.
Very sorry, it looks like Isabel has just frozen.
That is this bibliometrization of academic knowledge, accepting criteria. In other words, the rationale, so to introduce the high impact database and citation index as well as bibliometrics. So what were the actions here? So again, I'm focused on the second goal. The first one is increase national research numbers of publication, and the concrete action, but they didn't see how, was support paper submissions and foster or generates interactions between national research and international peers. But for the second one, the concrete action was changing the model of classification of academic journals, is changing the model of Publindex. I'm going to show you how. So The national system of indexation, that is Publindex, was used to classify the journals into 4 categories. The first one from the highest to the lowest, A1, A2, B, and C. A1 was the greatest academic value, and then A1 were those journals with the greatest academic value based on different kind of criteria, and C was the lowest academic value. So why the concrete action was to change this local system to this international system. In this sense, A1 were similar to Q1, A2 to Q2, B to Q3, and C Q4. And the way to measure this national journal were through quartile rankings and bibliometrics and H5 index. So let's see in numbers what is the meaning of this change. So we are going to focus here. We are in 2015. 2015, the policy was not enforced. So we have 526 journals for all the country. And what happened with the policy, we decreased the number of journals to 244. So we are going to focus on after the policy, and we change, for example, A1, that is Q1, we have 29 before the policy, we got 1 after the policy, and they are growing a little bit. There is in this moment 286 journals. There is some kind of adaptation that is will be very interesting to do research here and understand how is the adaptation of editors in these and the journals themselves. So what is the normalization here? And the normalization are focused on 5 aspects. Peer citations are the only acceptable standard of excellence. For example, the word impact was mentioned 15 times in the policy documents, and they didn't explain what high impact or impact means. So high impact means peer citation. So the normalization or the idea, implicit idea, is that peer citation as the only acceptable a standard of excellence. The second is the excellence is outside of the country. The policy built an argument based on the comparison between the low quality of national journals and the external as the benchmark. So the word international was used 17.6 times and as a synonym. So they say high impact journals or international scientific journals as synonyms. So given the idea that the excellence is not here in Colombia, it's outside of the country. Bibliometrics, CIMAGO journal rank, or journal impact factor are the most important measurements to improve the quality of national journals. This policy established the necessity of implementing these main bibliometrics as the commonly accepted tool as a way to assess research performance in the Colombian context. English is the dominant language of publishing. Although it was not explicit in the policy, it encouraged publishing in English over Spanish through bibliometrics, because, as you know, Q1 international journals are mainly, if an academic researcher in Colombia want to publish in Q1 journals, we have 1 for the country. Now we have 7, but most of them are in English. If we want to publish in Q1 journal, we need to publish in English. That is the dominant language of publishing. So this is the process of naturalization. Finally, copyrights and barrier to accessing knowledge are the cost of prestige. Copyrights, this policy institutionalized the copyright, that is a for-profit model of international commercial publishing and bibliometrics. So they normalize, it's normal that they're going to keep the property rights of professors, and this interchange is for prestige, is justified by the quality of publications, measurement through bibliometrics. So as a discussion, the findings show the academic journals for-profit models is embedded in the policy as a social structure that is shaping the social practice in research in the Colombian context. These social structures, the policy as social structure is controlled by private international publishers that define where and how we have to publish to be an ideal professor, and how needs to be the national journal to be the ideal journal. So we have here implication for theory and empirical implication, two consequences for national journal, Colombian researchers, and theory. As I said at the beginning, publishing has been categorized as public goods in the theory of academic capitalism. That is one important lens to understand these changes from public good to private good in higher education. But this theory did not consider the for-profit model. So this study underscored the importance of for-profit model of academic publish, and as a part of the academic capitalist regime of bibliometrics, as I'm going to show you. Let me show you a little bit about this theory. This theory has a model that that we are divided between the public good regime and the academic capitalist regime in higher education system. So the public good regime was the old, and the new one, this theory was 20 years ago, but they called us as a new one, the new academic capitalist regime. Both coexist, but academic capitalism is displacing the older and gaining more prominence. What happened is they separate. They say publishing is related to public good regime, free flow of knowledge, and if you want in research, privatization is through patenting. That means privatization of knowledge, and is related to academic capitalist regime. What I argue is that academic publishing is more complex, and publishing can be seen as a public good regime through open access articles, journals, even books, but also can be seen in academic capitalist regime through subscription-based articles and journals. So I add these new layers of academic capitalism, where subscription-based articles are seen as knowledge, as raw material that can be commercialized and privatized. But this is a new layer because no higher education institution or professor receive the monetary profits. The company keeps the property rights, and the monetary profits are professors receive the prestige. And all of this system is created by a few companies, or it is controlled by few companies that have the journals and have the bibliometrics. So this study argued that the commercial for-profit model of academic publishing is a new layer and an essential component of academic capitalist regime that generates profits for international companies, and even more, universities that need to pay high prices for publishers for both publication and subscriptions. And these new layers, I think you may say, okay, I am in the United States, or I am in UK, and it applies to all contexts, global north and global south. However, as I showed, it represents a higher cost for peripheral context, and I'm going to explain you more. For national journals, in Latin America, one of the studies showed that students were the user of 50% of journals. So this, when we are based on peer citation, we are overlooking other forms of impact beyond citations. Also, Latin America is a world leader in open access model journals. And you saw that it was decreasing the amount of journals in Colombia, so it's a loss for the country and for the continent. And this reduction of national journals creates a vicious cycle for classification. So imagine that you have a journal that is not classified in this new model, so you have to wait for 2 years to get classification. During these 2 years, nobody wants to publish there because it's not classified. So it's going to be harder and harder to get classification. And the same, if you get classification like Q4, is not the same as Q1, and researchers are going to look at other journals to publish. And for Colombian researchers, there are also implications. English language is tied to the hegemony of global North, academic publishing, punishing Southern publishing circuits. For example, in this new context, it's difficult for those who doesn't have English as a second language. They need to finish the manuscript and translate the manuscript. They apply. They don't even maybe know what is the translation because they don't know English. They don't know the idea is clear for the audience. And then that we are behind for the competition for prestige because we have limited resources for doing research from this context, and also for accessing, because and this is created because our libraries are reducing the budget for accessing to these subscription-based articles and web and database. So this creates a vicious cycle for research. So in some cases, piracy is understood as a way of survive. Okay, future research maybe focus on the editors of these journals, of the research, how they are navigating the new system. On other countries, it will be great if we can do a research comparing countries in the Latin American context. Okay, I'm open for the discussion. Thank you so much for your time.
Isabel, great. Thank you very much. That was a real deep dive into the Colombian context, but also I think it was very interesting that you gave us this engagement with the academic capitalism debate, because that, as you say, hasn't been used very much. And when it has been used, it's often been used obviously around universities, internationalizing or student finance rather than around publishing. I mean, there are some comments in the chat, so I will turn to them. There's a couple of points that you might want to think about. One is that actually the commercial journal publishing landscape has been around for a long time, and the profits have been around for a while as well. So it's not a brand new thing, though I think Latin America is being much more exposed to it fairly recently. And interestingly, many of the big publishers are now making much of their profits from open access, from gold open access. So from article processing charges. So it's not necessarily subscription models anymore. They are transforming to an open access model.
Yeah, one thing there that I didn't mention is that the golden access, when we have to pay a fee, and it's so high for this kind of context. So that's also an issue. That there is some way to have an open access, but also it's going to be a fee. So it is, I don't know if it is very expensive for your context, but it's really expensive for this one.
Absolutely. Oh no, it is absolutely. And there's all sorts of ways in which, if you're having to pay that, I mean, you have to have a large research grant. It works in the sciences, but doesn't work in the social sciences and humanities. Certainly doesn't work for students. And there's a whole waiver culture as well, which is problematic. Just one more thing before I turn to Jorge. You mentioned the reduction of national journals as a result. Are journals actually going down in status, or are some Colombian Spanish language journals closing? Have you seen some journals go dormant? Or when you say reduction of national journals, what does that
actually? They closed. We have 526 journals in 2015, and now we have around 200 journals in Colombia. The other didn't survive to the change.
Wow. So that's just a total loss of their
It's a lot,
accent.
yeah.
Okay. That's really shocking. And we perhaps can come back to that, but I won't take any more time. I'm going to turn to Jorge first. You asked a great question around the recent nature of research in Colombia. Do you want to come in and elaborate? Hi, George.
Hey, hello, good morning. Hello, everybody. Hi, Isabel. Nice to meet you. Interesting to learn that there are other scholars working on this topic. This topic, you see it very many scholars interested in Latin America, throughout Latin America, not necessarily in the US or North American context. But there are some things interesting to consider here. One, how Colombia in the mid 1990s did the first inventory of public periodical publications. Little by little, the process started to become more sophisticated, and it became a ranking. And this ranking, at one point, one of the policies linked the production of faculty from public institutions, higher public universities, their production to journals included in that ranking that is called Publindex. So, so it became interesting because salaries are linked to those publications in any indexed or recognized national or international journal. So that's one of the big issues there if you want to use academic capitalism as the analysis. So what happened is the history of most Latin American higher education systems is that most of the emphasis was teaching, not necessarily research. That's why I try to argue against the original idea of the common good about research, because it became like a fad, doing research. And so journals started to grow, also with private universities, but definitely a lot with public universities. You see, for example, the National University of Colombia with the largest number of journals. And you also saw it linked that they are the hosts of a big repository index that is called Cielo. And this is something interesting that they have the largest number of journals, but also the largest number of journals indexed in Cielo. So it's another factor, also the massification. So yes, as Isabel says, the incentive is that it comes from bonifications to faculty, but there is also a big perverse, for me, a perverse element, and is this association between expertise from Elsevier, Scopus, and the creation of the criteria requirements for indexation. The worst one, or the most of them, are respond to international characteristics of what a quality journal should be. However, using citations, impact factor, or any kind of measure of citations and creating quartiles and all that is perverse in the sense that it's something that is not really in the hands of editors. I am an editor of a Colombian journal. So we were in the first two versions of Publindex, 1996 and 2001. And as they created the model, or they incorporated the impact factor, that is not responsibility really of journal editors, we are out. Right now in one field, dentistry, for example, there are no journals included. And we don't know what's going to happen with the current Ministry of Science, with MinCiencias, because they haven't launched their call for evaluation and indexation of journals in 2 years. Apparently, they were in a good track to change the whole system, but we really don't know what's going to happen, and it seems that they are still going to fall again into the idea, the methodology, or the conception by Elsevier. So it's a huge topic, and I really like that you are trying to connect that to academic capitalism. There is much, much more to analyze there and to associate. So I appreciate that, Isabel. It's a very good thought and reflection and debate-provoking topic.
Okay, thank you. Can you put me your email there? I want to write you and talk more about that. Thank you.
Do you want to respond to any of that specifically, Isabel?
Sorry?
Do you want to respond to any of those thoughts from?
Well, I think Jorge complement the situation and show as an editor of the journal that I didn't look at that. I want to do a research with editors, and what he said is very important. That is not in the hands, so they don't even have the control to see what is happening. And right, the last measurements of journals was really in 2021, and the next year it was a resolution that said, okay, we are going to keep this for 2 other years. So we don't know what is going to happen with the classification of journal in the future. So we are here in this landscape. We are like losing like 40% of the journals, and we don't know what is going to be the incentives. So they are going to keep the same policy.
Can I just ask both of you? So you gave us the statistic, Isabel, of the number of journals being classified halving in 2017. You said it halved. Now, did those journals that weren't classified, did they immediately close down, or do they just carry on without a classification? Because journals, didn't need, they can create and support communities. They play a vital role, no matter how they're classified.
Yeah, that's very interesting question, David, because it depends. It's because here we have an accreditation for programs and institutions as in other parts, but we have a national accreditations. Some of the journals say, let's work on this for 2 years and see what happens next. The thing is that it's very difficult to get people who wants to publish in there, so they make a huge effort to make calls and have those people who wants to make an article there. So because people, as Jorge said, there is a promotion policy for higher education, public institution, but also for private institution. We need to publish, for example, in my case, I need to publish 9 articles in 4 years. 4 of them need to be Q1. So to publish in this kind of journals will be in works that I am just supported the journal, but not supported my academic career. So that happens for them. Some of them wait and they make a lot of effort and they then get classified. But some institutional decision because of accreditation, for them it's better to show we have this research group that here research group has also classified and will be very interesting to analyze too, which we show this research group, these researchers that are publishing outside of the country. And then because of this, as you said, we can have an open national journal, but if I don't have the support, the institutional support, because they don't see the point, is my work. So I have to teach, I have to research, and I have to keep a journal that is not classified. That is a lot of work. So sometimes they just close the journal. They say, no, we are not to work more on this. And others, that happened, everything, but most of them close.
Okay. So that does confirm, yes, what you suggested. It's just a total loss of knowledge. And sometimes those journals will have been around for quite a long time as well, won't they? Some of them might have been quite old. Okay, and I do think that the way in which Elsevier was employed to write that report, and it immediately was a sort of a fascinating moment at which suddenly they were able to define what counts as low quality for Colombia, and that is very interesting in terms of their power to shape this landscape. It would be interesting to see how often they've done that for other countries, how often they've been commissioned. Because of course they're only partly a publisher, they're also a data analytics company, and they make money out of that as well. I'm going to go to Rachel now, who had a question about public good. Rachel.
Yeah.
Hi there, can you hear me, David?
Can indeed, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much, Isabel, for your presentation, which I really enjoyed. I suppose I was just thinking about the kind of European context. where we have all the kind of commercialization, privatization that you were talking about, but there's also kind of quite a strong and kind of paradoxical public discourse about kind of the public value of publications. They have to be open access, because a lot of them are funded by states, by governments, and therefore taxpayers need to be able to read them. So it struck me that in Europe there is this kind of paradoxical discourse where, you know, there is actually quite a strong public argument that's put forward at the same time as all this private activity. So I just wondered whether that's also played out in a similar way in Colombia, or whether there's actually no debate about the public value of publications and that kind of knowledge dissemination.
Okay. Let me know if I can. Did you write the question?
So yes, the question was in the chat as well. It was, you know, you focus on how publishing has become a private good.
Yeah.
but
No, I said that publishing can be both.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. But can you what is the question of Rachel, please? That I didn't get it.
So I suppose my point was, in the discourse about academic publishing, is there a strong emphasis on academic publications as public goods linked to the open access movement?
Yeah, well, the theory didn't consider other way. The theory only considered that is free flow of knowledge. So I think that is a limitation of the theory that, for example, as you said, that in the European context is happening, in the US context is happening. So I think adding this lens to the theory, it helps us to understand the landscape of publishing in different contexts. What I am arguing at the end is like that is happening in Global North and Global South, but Global South has a special impact, as you see with the journals.
Perhaps I could just push you a bit further then, Isabel, because I mean, in some ways, what Rachel was pointing at was you could see as visible in the publicly owned indexes that Jorge mentions, like or the community owned indexes like Redalyc or Cielo, where there's public investment in a public good, just the knowledge. So within, you know, within this framing you're suggesting of academic capitalism, there are lots of ways in which there is still quite a lot of resistance to that through public investment in these community-owned indexes and databases. Is that fair to say?
No, really. Well, there is more resistance. For example, here in Colombia, well, there are some resistance in publishing because we still have open access journals and we are leader in Latin America, you know, open access. But there is more resistance for education, for tuitions here, for this as a resistance as education as private good than research. I think we in this context we are no. I maybe Jorge maybe help me, but I don't think we have that awareness about publishing as a private good or public good. We just follow the incentives. So the incentives are more related. Well, when you publish in Q1, you just want to publish in Q1. If you have the fee, the money to pay the fee, great for open access. But if you don't have, you want to have a Q1 journal in a publication. So it is for subscription. So I think research, I talk about Colombian researchers that are very straightforward. I want to publish in this kind of journals. If I have to interchange my property rights, it doesn't matter. I know that a lot of research is done based on public funding, and maybe they put like that idea there, like there is public funding here. but I don't see that as a resistance. I do know that our authors, as a academic community, if you, for example, I send you an email to reach Rachel or Jorge, we are very open to share our academic production because we want readers. So I think is if we are going to, for alternatives, ways to navigate the academic system of publishing, we try to like send an email or a ResearchGate, other ways to communicate our ideas.
Yeah. Okay. No, I get what you're saying.
I answered the question. I apologize.
No, it is very helpful. What you're sort of saying is either academics are less aware of the political economy of publishing, or feel unable to do anything about it. But also there's less societal awareness as well, such that, you know, student fees is something which affects everybody, and higher education funding is very visible, whereas academic decisions about where to publish their articles feels very individualized and so if it's not necessarily being privatized, it's certainly an individualistic culture, which is what you're describing, isn't it?
Yeah, and you need to keep your jobs too. So if you don't publish, you are going to be, what are you doing with your time? So yes, well, especially for youngers, because in academia it's not the same when you are in your, what is your stage. If you are like a senior, so you can have more freedom, but you are starting your academic career, you need to show some metrics.
Yeah, no, I get that, and that leads to a productivism where you're just producing more and more, faster and faster, trying to keep up. That's a problem. So thank you. So Yesid Ortega, do you want to come in? You put some interesting comments in the chat.
Yes, thank you so much. Hold on a second. Let me try to. There you go. Thank you so much for your presentation, Isabel. I apologize that I arrived at the last minute. I had a meeting that I had to get to, and I really wanted to come since the very beginning. But I get the gist of what is being said and what you are saying. And I just wanted to say a couple things in relation to publication, specifically with Colombia. I have ties with Colombian scholars, especially in language education, which is my field. And then this is an ongoing conversation that happens all the time at public and private spaces in Colombia. And one of the conclusions that we came about the discussion of all of these things is there is not much that can be done unless the decision makers do something to do that change. And what this means is the national accreditation system, or the Institute for National Accreditation, change the rules. If these rules are not changed, then all the way down, nothing's going to change, unfortunately. So at some point, somebody at decision making, like layers of governance and academic governance in Colombia specifically, although this happens around the world, has to change. And somebody in Conciencias, which is the entity that rules all of these things, somebody needs to change what it means to be impact. What do we mean by impact? What do we mean by measurement, right? And what do we mean by promoting from promotion in Colombia? So all of these things need to change for other things to change at a local level, because as Jorge was saying earlier, is that people on the ground are being pushed or forced to publish in Q1 for, I guess, capitalistic reasons, rather than to actually say, I really want to publish something that I did with, I don't know, my community or with my research or whatever, and I'm going to look for the most appropriate journal that really speaks to this, right? But then, unfortunately, because of the way it has been set up, then they are being forced to actually publish in Q1 journals. And then what this comes is to, they have to pay higher fees, they have to pay for translations, and you name it, Isabel, I'm assuming that you already talk about all of these things. But it's concerning, and it's concerning because it just perpetuates the capitalist system that we live in. And in education, at least, we are fighting back, sort of talking about this, how we resist or how we fight back. Some of the decision makers in different universities, at least in Colombia, are now looking at the colonial way of doing things, publishing in different journals, or other ways of publishing or mobilizing the knowledge, such as using podcasts or videos or fanzines or other grassroots magazines that they can publish that affect the direct community and they have a direct impact with community. So all this to say that, number one, thank you, Isabel, for bringing this awareness that, as you were mentioning, we need, or like scholars in Colombia, researchers, etc., need to be more aware of these things. And second, work together towards changing the way things have been done through proposing other ways in which knowledge can be mobilized in Colombia specifically while the game rules change. Thank you so much for the space.
Okay, thank you. I would like to add that where I review the policy in Colombia, they didn't take the time or took the time to analyze or talk to editors about what ways to change the system because it was low quality, but it was Elsevier who gave all of the material, all of the statistics. So they didn't took the time to analyze the landscape of Latin America, the landscape of Colombia. So the decision was easier, like it's the easiest way, like let's go with bibliometrics, that international bibliometrics. So one little change, I think this kind of presentation, or my intention is to create awareness. Like, let's think about this. Let's think. I don't know if we are going to change this because it's huge, but here for research groups are asking for social appropriation, and it is a way to like value other ways beyond journal publications. So I think it's just a little bit of for mitigate the changes that was done. Thank you so much for your comment.
Yes, thank you, Yasin. Thank you, Jorge, as well. I'm aware that there was one last question. Anding, do you want to come in? You asked about resistance as well. It has sort of been covered, but would you like to?
I think it has been covered. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. But
okay.
it was a really good question because, of course, you know, you Isabel, you pointed to the resistance to the privatization of higher education, and the less. Yeah, that's fine. Okay, so I think probably we should begin to wrap up. Isabel, thank you very much for a really interesting conversation. I think we need to carry on thinking about publishing. I know a lot of us are interested in this topic, and I think you've highlighted the power of an organization like Elsevier to define a problem where there hadn't been a problem before, and to suddenly, for a country like Colombia to suddenly sort of redefine half of its publishing as low quality is quite something in the space of one report. And I think that really needs thinking about, isn't it? The power of that discursive realignment of quality as low because they haven't got abstracts in English and Spanish, for example, which, you know, they are slightly contingent and sort of possibly technical criteria for quality. Anyway, thank you all for coming, and we will look forward to welcoming you all next week. Next Tuesday, we have Isaac Kamola from Trinity College talking about making the world global and thinking about how universities in the US have shaped the global imaginary of higher education. So we hope you'll all join us again, and every Tuesday. Isabel, thank you very much again, and for our commenters and questioners.
Thank you.
Great to have you. Thanks a lot.
Thank you very much for the space.
Bye-bye.